Now, there's a whole host of things that can contribute to anxiety, and they, like I said, they don't really matter. I am going to talk about one thing though. I know you might not feel like you've got a lot of power over this, but I think it's important for you to be educated, and you might be a parent yourself, because there is one thing we do have some control over that really is affecting our children and teens' well-being. And it's something that we could target. I'm going to say stress is the #1 contributor to anxiety, and our kids are stressed. Our kids are more stressed now than inpatient psychiatric patients were 50 years ago. Now, our students are experiencing compounding stress. It's one thing, parents and homework and teachers and social pressure and all of those kinds of things. They all contribute to anxiety. Now, most generations have all had very similar stressors in their life, right? Parents and homework and wars and, epidemics and all of those kinds of things. Some kids can manage those stressors better than others, right? And there's a lot of different things. Now, what is different about this generation? Because we are seeing way more anxiety, way more depression, way more self-harm, way more suicide than any other generation in history. And I could talk about all of it, but the #1 thing is the current state of our world. They have access to the current state of the world more than any other generations. We have a global culture of fear and safety, right? And it's really affected our kids because they have this crisis-saturated world at their fingertips, right? And that's negatively affecting their mental well-being. They're constantly bombarded with local and world news. When I was a kid, it was, the 6 o'clock news. That was it on one channel. Now it's 24/7 all the time. Social media is a big problem too, because it perpetuates all these negative posts full of emotions, and it's blurring boundaries between private lives and public lives. Just a 10% increase in negative social media exposure doubly increases, depressive symptoms. So social media is a huge piece. Now, with social media, we see way more constant comparison, way more pressure to be perfect in every area of life. Academically, in our sports, socially, right? And so that's a huge problem. It's not good enough to be valedictorian anymore, right? And teens are talking now about how devastating it is to juggle all of the expectations that their parents, teachers, and the whole world and society imposes on them. And that's huge. So we've created this world of such tremendous competition, right? Again, you can't just be a well-rounded student. You need to be the best at everything to get into the top universities and colleges, right? You have to seize every single opportunity. You have to exceed all expectations, and you got to do it effortlessly, meaning you don't complain about it, right? You can't complain about it. I have so many parents who talk about, just help my child see the silver lining. Why can't they just be happy? Why are they negative all the time, right? You can't complain about it. We see so much more loneliness, depression, anxiety, all of these things than ever before, even though we're more connected than ever before. And the more social media access they have and screen time, we see far more loneliness and school struggles. So I just want to put that out there, okay? I didn't even get into, the images and, a lot of our kids, their whole validation is based on the number of likes they get on whatever their social media platform. And they believe, I have to put the perfect picture out there for people to like me, but then people are only going to like the perfect me. And then now I'm anxious because what if they get to know the real me? But then they know how much work and effort they put into their perfect picture. They still assume everybody else's perfect pictures are actually the real life, right? And so they feel like I'm the only one who's sad and miserable and doesn't have friends and putting on this show. I could get into a whole session. That's a whole other session on social media, but I just wanted to put that plug in there because it is something that we can address. Now, aside from the effects of screens, it doesn't matter what the cause of. And so we got to stop asking kids, why are you so anxious? Why are you scared of dogs? Why do you have test anxiety? It doesn't even matter. What we need to focus on is how that anxiety is maintained. Intervention is about breaking the cycle that fuels anxiety. And this is a big one. I don't want anyone to feel bad, whether you're, I know you're all in education, but even if you're a parent, right, we're all well-meaning. We want to make kids feel better. We just don't realize that what we might be doing is actually inadvertently making them worse off, making that anxiety worse. I already kind of talked about this. One major trap is when we model our own anxious behaviors. Kids watch and learn from us, parents and teachers. So tip number one, handle your own anxiety. Now, it's okay to be stressed and to be sad and to be anxious in front of your students. That's okay. But it's not okay to be shoving it down and be irritable and totally erratic. It's okay to say, okay, I'm really feeling myself being triggered. I feel my fight flight. I'm feeling really stressed. I'm just going to go over here. I'm going to go in the hallway. I'm going to take 10 jumping jacks and I'll be right back in. I'm going to have a sip of water, right? It's okay. Model how you're going to cope with it. That's really important. We don't do that enough. Our kids just think we're either always brave or we never have any anxiety. We never have any anger. It's okay to feel those things and talk about it, but what are you going to do? Having overly critical, impatient, or hostile people in our life can be really hard too, right? We're always worried. That's not going to be helpful. If we're getting impatient with their emotional outbursts, why are you crying? It's just a stupid cookie. It's not a big deal. That's not very helpful. Conversely, we're always praising our kids or it's okay. And we've created this culture of everybody gets a trophy, and praising them for being the smartest on the team or the best on the team, or it doesn't matter, right? Like it doesn't, if we're always never letting them lose, if we're downplaying a game, or we're giving them a reason why they should have won, if we're taking away all of the disappointment, we're setting them up for failure. I don't want the first time they feel disappointed is when they're 25 and go for a job interview and don't get the job. Those people are the ones who fall so much harder and further. They're the ones who start thinking more suicidal, thoughts and things like that, because they've never had the opportunity to feel all of these things. Kids need to feel grief. They need to feel disappointment. We need to feel it alongside them, or at least allow them to. It's usually our own heartstrings that want to jump in and soothe everything and make them feel better. And that's a problem. We use catastrophic language, right? Where we provide safety info. Safety info is okay. Hey, kiddo, just lock the door. I'm going to run to the store. I'll be back in half an hour. Just lock the door behind me. And don't answer it. Just keep playing, doing your thing. Right. But then we add in what would happen if they don't follow that information, because otherwise someone's going to break in and they're going to steal you, or they're going to steal all our stuff. Our words are enormously influential on our kids. That is not helpful. So we want to definitely avoid that. All of our, oh, watch out. Oh, you're too high. Be careful, right? Oh, you can't slide on the hill without your ski pants, bud. Come back in. Be careful. Slow down. Don't run, right? Yes, our goal is to protect our kids. And I know at schools, there's liability. We want to minimize those risks. But what ends up happening is that kids don't learn how to take any risks at all. They're being told to be careful all the time. You can't do this. You can't do that. They're going to believe that the world is a dangerous place. And worse, they can't do anything on their own. And that's a problem, right? Hey, Dad, can I help you with painting? No, but I got it on my own, right? Or, hey, can I help decorate the cake? No, but I've got it. Or yeah, sure, you can help, but then we're going back and fixing it afterwards. That's not helpful, right? Or we bubble wrap our kids, and we've got this bubble wrap society of kids. I think you've all heard of helicoptering kids. There's lawnmowing kids. We're making it nice and smooth. I personally really love the shift to curling parents, right? This is really from the 80s. I'm from the 80s. And so, The Park, if you've ever seen the show The Park, you got to watch it. It was just a death trap of water slides. But with curling parenting, we are there, scrubbing that ice so that our little block can get exactly to the bullseye, exactly where we need it to be. But then our kids are never learning to do things for themselves, and they never learn, if there is a bump in that ice, how to cope with it. They've never had to cope with it before. It's like skating. If you've only ever skated at an indoor rink, it's nice and smooth. The minute you hit an outdoor rink, you don't know how to manage that bumpiness. And so that's a problem, right? We are crippling our kids. The more we bubble wrap them, we're suffocating their resilience, and we're just, leading to additional anxiety. We need to create kids who can manage whatever the terrain is, right? We're not there. Our job is not to make that smooth path. path. Rushing reinforces anxiety, right? If you're like that high-pitched yelling, oh my gosh, hurry up, we're gonna be late. If you're like that, leaving home, getting to the classroom, you're probably a little stressed out. And I bet a lot of kids have just experienced that now. What is happening when they're coming down to sit at the desk? They're not there to learn, right? If they just had that morning. So we got to think about that, if we're yelling at their names. Asking any questions, parents do that a lot if they're worried about their kids' social skills. Oh, who'd you hang out with at lunch today? Who are you going to play with? Who do you want to hang out with this? We're asking these questions that can lead to a lot of anxiety, or we're answering all of those questions. Your assignment looks really good. Don't worry about this. They're just asking a million questions. We got to stop answering those. Or we're asking them those why questions. Why do you feel like this? Where does it come from? We're just going to spin our wheels over and over and over. It doesn't matter why. Sometimes we know very clearly why, but we get sucked in. And the more we talk about the worries, we're just making the worries bigger and bigger. See, we're talking about it. So it must be really important. And most of the time, kids can't process it. Right? So we're turning ourselves with our prefrontal cortex online, asking an overwhelmed child who can't articulate, it's just going to make them feel worse. And most of the time with that amygdala, we have no idea why. The brain makes all of these wonky associations. If you've ever been in a car accident, you might have panicky feelings every time a Rolling Stones song comes on. Rolling Stones didn't cause your first initial car accident, but if it was on the radio, our brain is going to pick up any stimuli outside of our awareness, and we might not even know why. And so the amygdala's job is to associate an emotional memory to everything that it can in that moment. And it's usually fear-based memories. It could just be the smell, a very subtle smell that we don't even realize, or a color out of the corner of our eyes. Right? So we can't change what's causing it. It's just about what's maintaining it. Trying to get them to calm, just calm down. Don't panic. It's not a big deal. It's just going to make it stronger. And it's sending the message that anxious feelings are bad. You shouldn't be feeling this way. That's just going to increase some of that helplessness and them feeling like, what is wrong with me as they get older? Any reassuring that we do, there's nothing bad that's going to happen. Don't worry about it. That reassurance is a major problem that maintains anxiety, because it's one of the number one things that we do as adults. And students are learning to rely on us to make them feel better. Remember, anxiety wants them to feel better. It wants comfort. It wants certainty, right? And the belief that I can't handle it, so I need you here to handle it for me, right? So they're never learning how to cope themselves. And I've actually seen reassurance become an OCD, that compulsive behavior, needing to feel better, right? I need you to tell me that it's going to be okay. I need you to forgive me of my sins, right? I need you to check under my bed, or to check under, that the doors are locked, or to check my temperature so I'm not going to get sick, or whatever it is. We start doing the OCD with them. Saying don't worry. I mean, there's so many reasons why. These are just a few reasons why. There's a constant need for reassurance. If you've told them today everything's okay, they look good, their work looks good, nothing bad is going to happen, and you're saying the same thing tomorrow, you've created a dependency trap, because they need you to reassure them day after day. They don't know how to reassure themselves. It's not helpful. And when we have kids who are, when we're telling them not to worry about it, we're telling them to control their thoughts, which is completely impossible. It's impossible not to think. As soon as I say, don't think of a white bear, whatever you do, don't think of a white bear, it's going to be impossible not to think about it. Even if you're like, okay, don't think of a white bear, you've just thought of the white bear. Or don't think about your left hand. Whatever you do, don't think about your left hand. Doing that also minimizes how they're feeling. And they might start to learn that you're not really, interested in hearing what they have to say. And for younger kids, they might start getting confused. If it's not a big deal, why am I feeling this? Why am I such a baby, right? They start to internalize that. Don't look at this chicken. Game over. It's too late. You already did. Even if you didn't read it and you just looked at the words, you probably immediately looked down to look at the chicken, right? We just can't do it. The other thing is, kids can't see things from the same perspective. We can talk all we want, but when the brain is stressed, that amygdala kicks in and it takes the rational thinking brain offline. So they're not hearing anything that we have to say. It literally is going in one ear and out the other anyway. So we can just stop talking. Anxiety is going to show up whenever we don't have certainty, right? So whenever we talk about it, It's going to grow. It wants certainty. It wants predictability. It wants comfort. If you are giving any of those things to the child when they're feeling anxious, you are doing the anxiety for them. It makes anxiety feel really important, and we're making it worse. And so when we look at accommodations, do you know what the synonym for accommodations are? Now, first of all, I just want to say accommodations for an ADHD student, helpful. For a dyslexia student, helpful, right? They are helpful for so many students, just to help bridge, some of those executive functioning deficits. It's kind of like that prosthetic leg that they don't have that they need, right? Can be helpful. But in the anxiety world, accommodations, it's actually enabling. We are enabling anxiety. We're making anxiety worse because we're giving into the anxiety. We are letting kids avoid rather than feel that discomfort, and we're just setting them up for failure. So any accommodations that we give them, it's actually worsening anxiety in the long run. And we see more severe and poor treatment outcomes when they do seek support. So there's usually two ways that we accommodate. One is we're participating. We're doing the anxiety for them. So maybe we're reassuring them. Maybe we're checking their homework for them to make sure it's okay. Maybe we're just saying, no, you're looking okay. You're not feeling hot. Your temperature is fine. Or we're modifying things to make it easier so they don't feel anxious in the first place. Or we're preventing anxiety from happening. So, hey, kiddo, we've got a fire drill tomorrow, just to let you know. And so then parents decide to let the kids stay home from school, or at least for the morning, so they miss the fire drill. What the heck is that student going to do when there's a real fire? We need to startle that amygdala. It's not the fire drill that scares them. It's the physiological feeling of being startled that they don't like. And then they start worrying, did other people see me startled? Because I'm the only one, right? I'm sure everybody gets startled, especially if you weren't expecting it. What's going to happen when they're startled in a real situation? We need to startle that amygdala all the time so kids can learn to get that prefrontal cortex back online as fast as possible. That is really important. These are just a few examples of accommodations. Now, we feel like it's good. We're reinforced, they're reinforced with the accommodations because we might get momentary relief. In that moment, we give an accommodation. Oh, phew, we avoided that one. Big pat on the back. I made the student feel better. That's the problem. You made them feel better. They never learned how to make themselves feel better. So they never have the opportunity to learn to self-soothe. They never have the opportunity to problem solve. It's a very reactive approach. So these are just a few examples. There's a gazillion, I'm sure. And I just want to say, I'm always feeling like I'm apologizing on behalf of psychology because I see so many psychoed reports where the psychologist has said in their report, give these accommodations. When they're feeling anxious, let them leave class. Let them go to a sensory room, modify their tasks so they're not so, anxiety provoking. Now, here's the thing. If it's anxiety provoking because there's executive functioning deficits, the anxiety is secondary to the executive functioning deficits. We want to give them a graphic organizer so that we're taking off some of those working memory demands, right? But if we are putting in things so that they feel better, that's where it becomes a problem because they're never going to learn how to feel better. What's going to happen when they do you have to write diplomas, or when their boss gives them a job that's hard that they've never seen before? So we got to look at the IPPs. Are you accommodating for anxiety, or are you preventing anxiety from showing up? If so, that's a problem. You're actually crippling the child. And I've talked with so many school psychologists who've, especially the schools that are K to 12 or 4 to 12 or things like that. They're like, I've seen it. I remember we put in this one accommodation in grade 4. Maybe they don't have to put their hand up. Don't call them in class. They don't have to talk out loud in class. And now fast forward to grade 12 and they aren't even coming to school. This child is now not graduating. I've talked to so many professionals who are like, I have seen it happen before my eyes. So we got to make sure. Are you teaching skills? Are you simply accommodating? Or are you also teaching skills? Skills need to be taught. If they are just getting an office visit, a nice little break, who wouldn't love? You have a hard task. Who wouldn't love to just go and talk with Mrs. K and sit in a cozy chair with some fidget toys and, a warm blanket? And feel like, who wouldn't love that, right? Is there a transition plan? Okay, so maybe we have these accommodations in plan. What is the next step to get them back into the desk, into the classroom, doing the same work as the rest of the class, right? We need to make sure we're doing that. Are you addressing the physical symptoms? And are we using the same language between home and school? These pieces are so very important. So we want to make sure that we're focusing on skills in the classroom, skills where they need it, those skill-based goals, not avoidance-based goals. Just letting them go, that's avoidance-based. They need skills in the class. Even with those students who aren't getting classwork done in class and you're sending it at home and now they're getting it done at home, wouldn't it be great to always have one-to-one attention where your parents are probably going to do most of the work for you? You're an autopilot. You're not really learning. Kids need to learn how to get work done in class, right? Maybe we will modify. That's not really an anxiety example, but they need to learn those skills where they actually need to perform it. Again, same language between home and school, and then being very detailed and specific. Now, we want to make sure that we avoid safety behaviors, and accommodations become safety behaviors. And sometimes they're just so subtle, like I always need to have my water bottle. Just make sure she always has her water bottle. But then kids start to believe I can't breathe without my water bottle. I'm going to suffocate if I don't have my water bottle. So it becomes a safety behavior. So it could be, if I don't have this thing, like my lucky red sock, we're going to fail the game. Something disastrous is going to happen. So there are some acceptable safety behaviors. I mean, in the day of age of COVID, it's good to hand wash, before you eat. That's really good. That's kind of norm. Wearing a seatbelt, hey, that's a really good safety behavior when you're driving in a car. That's a good thing. But when they go to excess, when there's no objective danger, right? Like always needing my water bottle, that's where we worsen anxiety because it reduces the perception of threat. I can't handle it, but if I have my little lucky sock, it's going to help kids feel better in the moment. But again, they're never learning their own skills to be able to self-soothe. And we start to create unhelpful habits to cope. And that's just, preventing them from learning more adaptive strategies. So that's important. We got to remember, anxiety cannot be avoided. And so it's really hard because we just want to jump in. It might just take 2 seconds. It might be easier just to do the thing than to, have a potential blowout. But if we're always making things go as planned, it's going to be really hard. They're never going to become resilient. So if we're saying, yeah, no problem, kiddo, I'll check your work before you hand it in. Or you know what, there's a problem with some friends. Why don't I'll call in your parents, I'll call in the other parents, and we're going to, as adults, we're going to figure this out. You don't want to take a school bus? No problem, kiddo. Parents are going to drive you. So not a problem. Or you come to school, try out the morning, and at recess. You can make a decision at recess or at lunch. You can call home anytime, and then you can go home if you're feeling anxious. If we're doing any of these things, we are telling you, you can't handle it. Guess what? Students are already feeling like they can't handle it, right? We're reinforcing that message that they can't handle it. And we're creating this dependency trap where we're robbing kids of critical developmental opportunities to tolerate that discomfort, to learn how to manage worries, to how to manage challenges and situations on their own. That's so critical for emotion regulation, anxiety management, resilience. If we are jumping in all the time, we are actually harming kids. We are changing their brain development. We are impairing their brain development because they're not problem solving. They're not making those connections with their learning, and their learning is limited. And what ends up happening is we're ingraining that anxiety in their brain because those connections aren't being made. And we're just making them more vulnerable to big emotions because they have no opportunities to experience that, hey, I can cope with this situation. I can cope with this emotion, right? And so we're just stripping them of their confidence. So I'm always asking parents, I'm always asking teachers, what are you doing for the child that they can do for themselves? I tell parents, if they can manage a smartphone, they know how to work a laundry washer, or washing machine, or a dishwasher, right? Same thing in the classroom. What are you doing for a student that other students are doing for themselves? If it wasn't for anxiety, we need to stop doing those things. So that was a big chunk of time, but I think it's really important. Even if you just started changing, I actually have a whole parent program, has nothing to do with kids. There is no skills for kids to be working on. It has everything to do for parents to stop accommodating, for teachers to stop accommodating. When you do that, they're just going to automatically have to develop the skills that we want to do. So if you took nothing else away, that's huge. What's one thing that you could start doing, making them boss up, making them accountable for, responsible for? So when we're looking at, the number one thing that our students need to learn when it comes to anxiety or any emotion regulation is how to manage the experience of the big emotion. So in this case, the anxiety, it has nothing to do with the trigger. It's more connected. So children who develop anxiety disorders, it's connected to how they manage the fear, how they manage the experience of that anxiety. It's not about the trigger. So it's about managing. So that brings me to the next piece. What should we be doing instead? So yes, the kids need to learn and to cope and tolerate, and that's coming, but we need to make sure that our environment is supporting them to be able to learn those skills and use those skills first, so that we're not always making more of a problem. So how we respond to anxiety makes all the difference in the world. We got to use our brain, our mirror neurons, right? The brain can't tell the difference. And we see this sometimes. If you yawn, the closer you are with someone that you're observing yawning, the more likely you are. If it's just a stranger, you probably aren't gonna, the likelihood of you yawning isn't as good as if it was, your twin sibling or someone who's really close to you. It's the same with our dogs, actually, as well. So think of when kids are first learning to walk. Your facial expressions and hand gestures, all of those things even have an impact on the student. So when they're first learning to walk, we're like, yeah, come on. Our eyes are wide, right? We have an open body. Come on, come to mama. Yeah, that's it. Oh, get back on up, get back on up. We're so happy and encouraging. That's kind of what we want. We don't need to be so over the top. If you did that to a teenager, they're probably like, you're really weird, right? We don't want to do that. But we're showing them confidence. That's what we're doing. If you're like, oh my gosh, every time they fall down or they're about to hit something, they're going to fall down and not want to walk anymore, right? And so thinking about if they've climbed a tree really high and you start freaking out, the chances of them falling are going to increase quite substantially. So it's like, oh, wow, dude, you went up so fast. Let's see how you're going to come down, or show me, like, do it in reverse. I want to see how you got up there. We want to show confidence rather than freaking out. So a big part of this right connection is being an effective emotion coach, right? We can't do, just like a coach, on the ice, we can't go out and play the game for them, or a music teacher. We can't go up on, during the recital onto the stage and play their instrument for them. We are there to support them and show encouragement. We are confident that you can do it. That's really important. Now, to be effective, we have to understand the function of emotions. I often see a lot of kiddos who are diagnosed with oppositional defiance disorder, and I put those in quotes because I would never diagnose a child with ODD. You might disagree. You might be like, Caroline, come and visit my school, right? I've got some that I could show you. But every single one of those students, and I've seen a lot of severe ODD students, every single one of them, there's this underlying anxiety. Their behaviors are there to protect them. They are anxious children. We got to remember, there's no such thing as bad kids. That is so important. And so understanding emotions is a really important piece here, because emotions drive our behavioral responses, and we need to have these. We need to have anger to defend ourselves or to defend our opinions or things that are important to us. We need to have fear so that we can get out of danger's way. We need sadness so we can go and take that time to process everything that's happened and then come back for support, right? We need to have shame so we avoid situations that go against our values. We need to have disgust so that we don't eat poo, right? We need to have all of these things. If we only focus on the behavior, we're going to miss what's actually happening. Most of the time, these kids are reprimanded because they're acting out of anger. They look angry, but it's because they're protecting themselves. If that child was scared or hurt, right, we got to break it down. So if a student's yelling at you, they're a hurt child. Think about a time if you've ever stubbed your toe or hit your head on something, you're probably like, oh, shoot. You probably responded with anger and maybe even swore. The pain part of your brain lit up. And when the pain part of our brain lights up, guess what? We respond aggressively, because we need to, if we need to fight the danger. So if we're digging down, there's usually lots of emotions, but I will say anger is secondary to fear. And anger might look like the strongest and the most predominant, but it's secondary to a whole host, the biggest one being fear. And a lot of these kids have worries about abandonment. We all have attachment needs. We've all heard about attachment. We all have attachment needs from the minute we're born to the minute we go to our grave, right? And if they haven't had a lot of success getting their needs met in whatever environment they are, we see problem behaviors maintained that's kind of confirming their core attachment meanings and fears and needs. And behaviors are often a response to some threat to attachment or some underlying major need that's not being met. And so they're creating these maladaptive behavioral responses to protect themselves, or to maybe to get their needs met, but to maybe protect themselves, especially from being vulnerable. And so we see some trigger situation. There's the core attachment, emotions. There might be some hopelessness. We see that potential pain, which could, some kids will run away and cry, but some will act out aggressively. And so we see this whole process happening.